Hi everyone, welcome to the greenhouse discussion where today we're meeting a couple of experts to talk about climate and how it interacts with pests and diseases. So we'll be talking about warm climates, cold climates, dry, humid, all sorts of things, and also what kind of cultivation challenges you can have at different periods during your cultivation. To discuss these topics, I have brought with me a couple of experts who are in different fields specialized and will be telling much more about their experiences in the field. So let's start with the introduction. Guys, I hope you're excited.
Really?
Yes,
In a nice environment.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bit warm and humid, but we can work with that. We're used to being in a greenhouse. So Lisa, can we start with you?
Yeah. Hello, I'm Lisa Broekhuizen. I'm an entomologist and I work as a technical consultant for Koppert and mainly specialized in vegetables such as these peppers that we are surrounded by now.
Awesome. Great.
Well, hello, my name is René Bierkens, working at Hogenoorn as a data-driven growing specialist, all about greenhouse climate, being active like in all climate regions in the world.
Yes, and my name is Paul van Geels. I work for Lumifort and I'm a consultant in light and coatings around the globe. So growers like to be helped how to optimize climate, and that's my profession. Yeah.
Great. I'm excited to dive into some topics with you guys later. We'll be talking about a couple of different topics, as I said in the beginning. We'll split those up in the platform and we'll try to talk about as many things that we see in practice as possible. But if you have any specific questions or challenges, feel free to drop them in the platform and in the community, and we'll be very happy to answer them there. So starting with the first topic, cultivation challenges, moments in the cultivation when things might go wrong, where you have to be extra careful before pests and diseases can really create some damage in your crop. Let's talk about some of these challenges, and you have some experience, I imagine, from all over the world about growers facing challenges in different stages of the season, about the cultivation season. Can you start us off, René, maybe with some key examples of things that you think are critical moments during a cultivation?
Well, I think it's rather cliche, but it all starts with the right quantity of photosynthesis to support the whole plant growth process. And if you look to this crop, it's like bearing a lot of fruits, but at the same time the light where we are coming from was quite limited. So that makes it like, it's just in balance, but it doesn't have any, reserves. And there you really can look for example, the roots. If they are really good sustained, then you're still good. But that is moving into springtime, luckily brings more light, brings more ability to produce more fruits and bear these fruits to the end.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, so you watch the roots. The root quality is kind of a gauge for how well
that's above ground. It's mostly like if flowers are aborted, you're already too late. So in one level earlier is that you can see from the roots, if they are healthy and having right white root tips, you're still good to go. There's still some energy surplus for the plant.
Right. Yeah. And Lisa, do you see the moments that René is bringing up with coming from winter to spring? Days are getting longer, but also the plant has a lot more fruits to bear and a lot of production hanging on the plant. Do you see that is also a challenging moment in terms of?
Yeah, for sure. Because when the plant is full of fruit, it costs a lot of energy for that plant to fill this fruit. If it is full of fruits, then it will grow a bit less and put all the energy in the fruits. But then it also has this moment where, because of this higher energy cost, they can put less energy in their resilience, and therefore they will be more susceptible for all kinds of pests. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So from my point of view, I always see the difference from winter to summer. So and now a lot of growers, not here, also use LEDs. So you come out of the winter, you come into spring, the light levels are changing, the colors of the light levels are changing, the the stand of the crop, and you see that plants change. Just like you mentioned with plant loads. Are people really looking for plant load, or just let everything come and go? Or do you pick out some of the fruit in the peppers, or make the trusses shorter, just to steer the crop a little bit better? Like in this case, if the plant load is too high, the leaves get shorter in the end, in the end of the plant. And if this guy is opening his screen because the sun's coming through, and there is not enough shadow of the highest leaves, the young fruit is directly in the sun. So there are a lot of things as a grower you need to think of to steer the crop well.
I think stability is now key, that you don't have excessive things, because the crop has a sort of status like we just can bear what we are experiencing. But if you indeed, if it would be very sunny and very warm with low humidity suddenly, then this plant will have difficulties to adapt to the changing condition towards springtime.
But that's quite hard though. When you started off, René, with talking about how light and photosynthesis is the number one thing to get in order to start the defense of the plant. But at the same time, when the sun is up, you also shouldn't try to catch every single ray of sunlight.
It's a sort of, if you get a sudden high light level, you're sort of getting confused. So you need to adjust the light levels slowly, like day by day. Normally by nature, every day you get some more joules or some more past some. But if you get a sudden change in weather and you like the outside temperature goes up, vents go open, low humidities and high light, well, that probably will stress the plant, and so you have to increase the level that the plant can handle every day. But we cannot handle too big changes in a matter of 2 days, because also the plant has to adapt its whole morphology, but also the root structure. If suddenly there's a high light, you suddenly need a lot of water uptake, but that also means that the rooting system has to be prepared. While we are coming from a low light period, so the roots have never done that before. As soon as a plant already has done something, it will be better prepared to deal with those conditions.
You also have to realize that every crop is different, so the sap flow is different. So like this is a wooden crop, so the sap flow is less quick than like a cucumber. So if there is a weather change, like cloudy weather, sun, clouds, this crop has more difficulties to get the water up than with a cucumber. And these are all things you need to take into account in spring.
Any ways of measuring this stress that the plant is seeing?
All about sensors nowadays, right?
That's where we can see with plant temperature directly. If the highest leaf is not getting sufficient water, it will elevate its temperature because it doesn't have the water to cool itself down, and that can be directly measured by a plant temperature. That's a direct indicator that the whole ecosystem is not able to cope with the given situation. So plant temperature is key to move forward. And I think you also do that sometimes, like with looking at plant temperature.
I try to show growers more and more that plant temperature is maybe important. The combination of a measuring box and plant temperature is, I think, key for the future. Now everybody is focusing on the measuring box. They say, my box on 1, 2, 3 or 4 hectares, one box. That's the way I plan my, I steer my crop. But if you also see the leaf temperature or the plant temperature, then you know how the plant is acting based on what's happening in the air and from outside. And I think that is an extra tool to steer it a little bit better. Yeah, so I work with temperature measurements, and I have sensors with extra leaf temperature measurements.
That's a sort of a first indicator. You also have thermographical cameras, but like if you look in the sort of the control process, we use a plant temperature looking at the top leaf layer, multiple square meters. So it's more an industrial type of sensor with a very high accuracy, and then from there we really can signal stress moments. And sometimes you detect stress, but then like you are just too late with irrigation, for example, you could detect from the plant temperature. But also on the other hand, coming from above, if the energy load is too high and the root system is not capable of supplying that water, also that will be a stress indicator. And from there you can optimize your controls.
And stress you see with beneficials or insects which are bad for your plants. So if you have stress in your plants,
Yeah, you can immediately see it by the pest. And pests can really search also for the most stressful plant. For example, the aphids, they have this antennae, and they can really see when they look at a big part of the greenhouse by a lot of meters away. Oh, I see that plant over there is stressed, and they will all go there.
For the weak plants.
Yeah, they can sense it by the vibrations of that plant, and they all go to that plant. And I really see it in the field that one plant is full of aphids and then the next one has none.
Right. Yeah.
so it's not the sweetness of the plant or the color or
With the stress, the plant is more attractive, and often, not always, but often it's also more has more nutrients for the aphids to reproduce more new aphids.
So we started talking about Brix more and more. So Brix on one hand is good for the Brix percentage of your fruit, and on the other side, it's not always good for the sugar percentage in your leaves and attract or disattract pests and disease. So it's always a difficult thing to be in. It's all about balance. And often we think only in balancing of the crop, but it's more. It's the balancing is in as a stimulant balance, as an energy balance, the water balance. There is also a biological balance and everything. So I think that there are more balances to come.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, to get the balance, you want your natural enemies to be there, be active, and the best is to have your own kind of rearing in the greenhouse. But we see when you come from winter, with the short days, the biology really has trouble with getting up speed. They really need more sunlight to get into action. So it's always hard that moment to get this balance.
So to limit issues, of course it makes sense to try and limit stress as much as you can. But another topic that we have discussed in an earlier conversation is about having these banker plants that also attract pests that you can use as a gauge to see what the pressure is like in the greenhouse. Because of course for a pest to become a problem in the greenhouse, it needs to be present, the plant needs to be susceptible, and the conditions need to be right. So we've covered about the plants being susceptible. I think we also did talk a bit about what conditions pests and diseases like, but we will dive into that later today as well. But in terms of the presence of the pests, do you have some tips or experiences?
Well, as you say, the banker plants can really help. For example, there are some grains with a grain aphid that can only stay on that kind of plants, so they will not go to other plants. Has to do with the plant species. If it's a monocotyl, the aphids will only stay on that kind of plants and not go to dicotyl like the vegetables we are growing. And in that way you can have the aphids and already start your own parasitoid rearing on that plant before the aphids are in your crop, because every time you release new insects, they have to adjust to the circumstances, the crop and everything. So if you already have the next generation in your greenhouse, they already are adjusted to the circumstances and get into action faster and better.
Right. And are there some plants that you can use to try and lure the whiteflies or the aphids, for example, to... I can imagine it takes... I've heard a lot of times that scouting, yes, it's a no-brainer, but it takes a lot of time. Would it make sense? Do you have any ideas on maybe if you just have a couple of plants that you just need to look and you know that these plants, if a pest comes in the greenhouse, they will for sure attack that plant first.
Yeah.
That could make it a lot more time saving, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I also see it with some herbs or some weed that is growing around, that it's more attractive for certain pests. But yeah, you mean like to have a kind of signaling plant?
Let's say, you mentioned some aphids are attracted by species of plants, so I'm sure that not every plant works. But for example, we're currently in a pepper greenhouse. It could be a tomato greenhouse, chrysanthemum greenhouse. But having a plant that would attract pests earlier than the crop you're growing in the greenhouse, that could
Like
be
signal plants.
Yeah.
like a signal.
Eggplants are really plants but they attract so heavily that it would be perfect to have them here and there. But they attract also from outside. That's not something
so
you
that's
want. So
also
that's the
the
discussion. How big of an attraction is a plant like that? You know, there are in the past we used, I don't know the English name, but Afrikaantjes. We used it in the what is it called?
Marigolds?
Marigold? No, I don't know. But the thing is
We'll
that
post it in
we
the
posted
video
it. But
somewhere in the
Afrikaantjes, put them in the soil, and then you have less trips because the trips will be attracted by them. So there are a lot of things working inside greenhouses, like signal plants or banker plants. Besides that, I was recently in Spain, and I found out that in the olive fields and farms, there are cherry trees here and there in between the olive farms. So I wondered why that was, and that's the same idea. So in olive farms, they have sometimes other plants planted early days just to have attraction for plants and diseases to that cherry plants, which can grow for the olives. So in every nature, people thought about how can we deal with that situation.
That's also when they start a crop cycle in a closed greenhouse, so that you don't lure them from outside. They also put, let's say, in a big empty greenhouse, just one plant.
Yeah.
If there would be any pest, it would go in there.
Yeah.
Then they have a bag, they seal it off,
Yeah.
just to have sure that they have everything.
Stericus
taken
is
out.
one of the crops. If you have that seedlings and you can immediately see that was from the methyl time. That is really long time ago. Then we could see that it is still not good to grow plants, and that's something we don't use nowadays anymore. Luckily,
I also visited a grape orchard, and there they also had a plant which was more susceptible for powdery mildew than the grape plants, and it was in front of every row, and once they saw just a tiny bit of mildew on that plant, they
Roses.
start spraying.
They use roses for that, right?
I don't know if it's
No,
roses.
so
it was,
I was with one in the Netherlands, and they had on every row roses, because roses really
are
for
susceptible
mildew.
for mildew.
It's
Yeah,
like
so
Yeah, it's
then
like
they
an
already
indicator
knew
plant.
that they have to do something,
Yeah.
because a few days later, 1 week later, it would be happening in the grapes. Yeah, so
But I think it's important to make this small warning or disclaimer indeed, to not take into any plant into your greenhouse. There are always some risk that can occur. For example, the spread of viruses. There are a lot of plants that can contain viruses which can be spread by the insects that are on that plant and going to your greenhouse. And so what I mostly see in a lot of greenhouses is that they are not putting total new plants in, but they know a lot of growers have different varieties, and they know which variety is most susceptible for certain pests, and then they look at that variety to search for the pest, and then it's I think that's the best way. And if you want to bring new plants into your greenhouse, know what you're doing, know the risks. For example, with the grains, you take no risk because the aphids cannot transfer to your plant. But there are a lot of plants, or I've known some growers that have this kind of hobby corner, and the grandfather or anybody wants to have besides the pepper also some cucumber, eggplant, and
usage.
Yeah, and then we really see that is the starting of, and then they're like, oh, why do I have whitefly every year? Yeah, they are rearing. You have a kind of whitefly rearing over there, so that's. Please keep in mind, yeah, what you're doing and pay close attention to what's happening on those plants.
Yep.
Because they can also start a new problem that you otherwise shouldn't have.
And be aware of stress. So really difficult situations like weather conditions with cloudy weather, sun, that the plant is having difficulties to stay in balance, to keep on track. If you get off track and your plant is having difficulties with too much light or heat, problems will occur.
Yeah, and also if you bring new plants in, then it's always a suboptimal climate for that plant. You make the climate, you make the climate good for your value crop, and not for this banker plant. So the banker plants can be stressed, and therefore also.
Good humidity controls, they are crucial. Like to have a rather stable humidity control and not going to very lows of 55 or lower humidity,
but often
relative humidity.
Put them close to the walking path, and there's always a bit drier.
But like now, so now we are here in the morning and on this location, and this grower decided to step by step open the screen in small gaps, so that the temperature is not falling down all of a sudden. So you see the line getting a little bit bigger during the moment that we are filming. So here they really try to close the gap. Somebody else is normally saying that between upstairs and downstairs to have another huge difference in temperature falling down on the head of the plant. So everything helps.
Exactly. I'd like to end this section off with getting back to the first question, which was about the different moments in cultivation when growers need to be extra careful. We mentioned rooting, we mentioned the start of production, or almost the start of the production, where peak plant load is achieved. Are there other moments that I'm missing or that growers should be aware of?
Well, if you look to moments and if you look to the data-driven approach, you have a year cycle, and roughly you know what you're going to get in terms of light quantities and temperature quantities. Of course, they will always vary on day to day or week to week a little bit, but roughly you know towards the longest day you will get more light and the temperatures will rise, and also from there you can make a correlation. What will the climate be in the greenhouse? What will the plant balance be? But also where would be the vulnerabilities to pest and disease? Because I think if you have multiple years of experience, you probably know, okay, the upcoming weeks, this probably will be a heavily discussed point at growers that you will visit.
Yeah, for sure, because in the beginning is a challenge because of day length and the number of lights. It's also a challenge for the natural enemies to get started. And once they are almost started, then you start opening your windows because of the too high temperature when sun is coming in, and once the windows are open, new pests can come in, of course.
So there's multiple factors.
And you can understand that now we're here in the Netherlands, but it is different if we are sitting in Mexico or in China or Australia. So the outside environment, extent of the crop, the start of the crop, there are so many variables to be aware of.
But still you have a sort of a data line, like a 365 day, like going up and going down, so you know where your vulnerabilities are in terms of climate, light, but also pest and disease.
But it all comes down in, is your water available, how is your light level, your temperature. So you don't want to have high, low level of light and temperature.
For example, now we feel it.
You feel the temperature dropping.
There is a drop in temperature now because of the screen opening the last stage.
A little bit quick, yes.
Yeah, now it's going
But outside it was only 5 degrees, so you can.
That's where the aspirator above the screen can be applied. Optimized.
All right. Okay, thank you.